Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. Okay, in one of the deals, the seller financed, although it was a dilution, I believe, 7% of the stock, they got $1 billion cash. So it's like they drained the working capital loan out, and they drained the line of credit out for $1 billion, and then they pay 82 jillion times EBITDA. But it was a cashless transaction other than the cash that they received. And it was a share-for-share deal. And I told you, share-for-share deals and the senior executives at these companies realize it's like monopoly money. And most of the big overpaid EBITDA deals are done for a strategic reason. Or at least they come up with a strategic reason to sell the shareholders so the shareholders don't throw them out. Yeah. But then it's up to you to perform. In Disney, for example, Iger, who's back at Disney again, he took a big chance and did deals in the beginning of his career back in the mid 2000s, which worked out, and so he's legendary. And of course now he's being brought back. But what happens once in a while is you'll be trying to buy somebody, and their uncle or cousin or somebody will say, well, in the public market, the ABC Public Health Company is selling at 22 times EBITDA or 19 times EBITDA, and you're offering 3 to 5. What's wrong? And the answer to that is, right now you have zero liquidity, and your company's worth closer to zero than 15 or 20 times EBITDA. And the example occasionally I use is between the Shanghai and the Beijing market, public markets are really high EBITDA because there's very little liquidity. And then they launder money from those two exchanges to the Hong Kong, which has got more liquidity, less EBITDA. And then they go from Hong Kong to the London Stock Exchange, where there's tremendous liquidity and it's a world-class market. And but that's how those guys launder money. They go from Beijing, Shanghai, or Shanghai, Beijing, whatever, to Hong Kong to London. So once in a while, you can tell them, when you get on one of the public exchanges and there's instant liquidity and you have millions, if not tens of millions of shares in the public arena, then your company will be worth more. But you're not right now. You're sitting here with your little company doing $2.5 million in revenue, $1 million in EBITDA, and the market is 3 to 5. But most of the guys, and it's true, the banks, if we were doing commercial lending, though we're recommending you not to do commercial lending, you should still use it as your benchmark, as your default, as your plausible deniability. The banks won't let it, and even if the banks allowed it, my board won't. And that normally works. So, would you have done a deal?
Yeah, makes from AB Dev's perspective, they just strengthened their hold of the market. They strengthened their hold because back then in '96, Corona was the most imported beer in the States. So it was a win-win. The two Mexican guys, they pocketed 20 billion. Yeah. They probably would be. We couldn't find out how old. Did you end up finding out?
We couldn't find out how old they were, okay. But the numbers from 8 years previous, right, shows like a constant growth of models. So
yeah, it was making a profit. It was making money. We're assuming the guys were long in the tooth and wanted to cash out. So to me, it made sense. To me, it just the EBITDA number. But when we do the figures, it worked out to be 20 billion. So it looks like it was 8 times EBITDA.
Which was cash deal?
We discussed that. We don't know because it didn't tell us. We were talking about the structure, how we would structure it. I didn't think you could do 100% seller finance, but then Mr. Frenchy here mentioned the share doing that.
It is.
But then I thought, if I'm
He's smarter than he looks.
No, he's great. I would have thought we then discussed the 60-40. Whereas if I'm the Corona guys, I get 12 billion and then 40% is in shares. And I thought, I'll take that deal. I'll take that deal.
And if I remember correctly, the shares went up. So, and that's the lure of the 60-40 to the docs or whoever that keep the 40.
Yeah.
And they may, if they're smart in the 40, what they'll say is, we want the option to sell to you, but we don't have to sell to you. And we keep the 40 and exit when you exit. Because when they see the thing grow and they see all these things happen, it also has a second lure of keeping them in the office. Because they see that their effort and the camaraderie or the spirit of core or the leadership, whatever you want to call it, that comes off of them onto the employees that they've known for many years. Everybody's working harder, and not dissimilar to Elon Musk. I don't know if anybody's working on the weekends at any of Musk's companies now. But years ago, I mean, they used to be, a lot of people not dissimilar to my experience at Great Western. It wasn't unusual to have, 30-40% of the employees working over the weekend. And in addition, no overtime because they wanted the company to grow. And then they, I didn't know this, but they didn't allow anybody to put in overtime. Which now, what a scandal that'd be. If the managers are strong-arming people not to put in overtime, Jesus. Mm-hmm. I couldn't run a public company in this environment. I mean, I just couldn't.
So even in these big deals, AB Dev, who bought out Corona, would they still want the owners to stick around for a period of time?
Yeah, but in the old days, you didn't have a management contract, but you had some sort of consulting agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
Not like a regular employee, but a consulting agreement. And you'd normally be on the board. Either one or both of them would be on the board. Mm. But you'd go down to the Corona factories and to not rally the troops, but to know that you're still around. And in the bad deals, when they piss off the sellers and they say, fuck you, I don't need a $500,000 a year consulting agreement, that almost always had a detrimental effect on the employees. Here I've worked for 17 years or whatever the hell, and then the sellers got fucked. And they don't. And normally there was a clause that they couldn't badmouth the buyers, kind of like an NDA gag order, mm-hmm. And so they wouldn't, be able to publicly badmouth. But now you go on some blog or something or other and say, I hear from so and so that they did, they're burning babies in ovens or some shit. So, but it's a different world now. It's harder to be the CEO of a public company. It just is, and that's why when I talk about you may get 10 or 20% less, and you don't get all your money anyway when you go public. Is to sell out to a strategic buyer where you can just hit the cash register and run like a thief in the night with all your money and do it again. And then the thing to negotiate is what kind of non-compete you have. How long? Okay. And so you sell your business in Boston and you go to California where the sun bakes your brains too much and you start up again. And very few non-competes say you can't compete. Normally it's within 1,000 miles or within this or with that. And that's, where a lot of people start over again. And you guys are all young enough that, this roll-up will be the first of several. And at some juncture, you'll say, like we've got a couple who's still sailing around the world that exited in 98 or 99 when they were about in the early 30s, and now they're long in the tooth, but they're still sailing around, One of their permanent places is Tahiti. Another one is, I forget, it was some other place. And they're wrinkled and tan now.
Must be boring at some point.
Yeah, well, and about 4 or 5 years ago, they took 6 months off and they started in the Keys in Florida. They drove from the United States up to Alaska. It took them a year. It doesn't take a year to drive that far, but they stopped and that. And then again, I hear they didn't do it because Corona interrupted. They were going to do another one. They were going to drive through Europe. And so, but Corona, I don't know what they're doing now, but Corona interrupted their vacation, not their work. And then some have taken off. some of the young kids that started when they're 13, 14, 15, they're now in their late 20s, early 30s. They've come back to work. A couple of them come back to work because they pissed through all their money. Okay. A few of them come back to work because they get bored. Some of the older guys, you can only bounce your grandkids on your knee so long before that, notwithstanding they piss on you and all kinds of other stuff. You can only do that so long, and then you get tired and you want to go out and do something. My grandkids, who I'm going to see in a few days, when's the bouncing on your knee part, Grandpa? We haven't had that yet. So, but
you have artificial knees, no? Or
I have artificial knees. Absolutely correct. And Sally not to give me in the calves. So I'm lucky she can't get her leg up high. So I have an artificial hip anymore. But but I would have, if I would have been them. So getting back to your question, so you would have had them come, and be the. In some cases, you make them chairman emeritus, which has no authority, just a title. Okay, and they come back and and they do functions, especially in when you buy something that has foreign assets, you want some foreign face that is the same ethnicity as the people that you're buying. They come and show up for holidays, etc. And you make that part of the contract. It's easier when you're paying them in installments. Okay.
Yeah.
But when a lot of guys and gals that start these companies, they're in their 20, 30 years, you do feel a kindred spirit. And so, a lot of the employees they personally hired. So that's fine.
Okay. That probably wouldn't have happened, would it? That they pay $12 billion to the two owners up front, would they? They'll do progress payments, most likely, I'm assuming.
Well, no, but I mean, they took $20 billion.
$20 billion, and then we were doing the 60-40. So the owners would get the $12 billion, and then 40% would be in the shares.
So they but that's skin in the game when they have the shares. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It depends on what their potential exit would be for those shares. Can they sell them anytime?
Yeah.
Can they sell them after 3 years, 6 years, 9 years? Yeah. What kind of public appearances? Like when the big movies come out, this
Black Adam.
Yeah. Dwayne Johnson had required, he had to go to 18 or 20, what do you call it? He went to more.
Oh, the opening nights. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not dissimilar for the sellers, but it's easier to control when they still have 40% in the deal. Yeah. It's easier to control.
That 40%, you mentioned the positives about it, but would the negatives be potential? What if it goes down in value, they've lost that $8 billion that they would have got if they made a full.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. But then they could make more than $8 billion if the shares rise.
For example, the shares double, that 8 is 16.
Yeah.
And then if they have confidence that their company is good and the margin is going to be beneficial to the buyer, so they know that definitely the shares are going to go higher in a couple months or years.
It's all about what the perception of analysts and the market. I guess.
Correct.
The stock could tank even if the acquisition made sense. Can we talk about Disney
for
a second? So we really spent more time actually, not on the numbers, but understanding everything they had tied together before, because basically, from what we understood, do you mind if I...
Yeah, no problem.
Pixar was born from Jobs buying to Lucas computer technology that they own. And at that time, the animation part of Disney was probably tanking progressively. Creative
was more or less non-existent.
Yeah.
They were still hand-drawn shit. And when they changed something in the cartoon or whatever, they had to go back to the beginning and put it in by hand.
Like old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned. Whereas Pixar, under Steve's leadership, and he used to say, I'm just letting these super creative people have their head. In other words, do what they want. And he saw that because he was a visionary. He saw how that was going to develop. And what they really developed was the pixel. I don't know if it's Pixels has anything to do with Pixar, but they developed the pixel and they saw what they could do with the more pixels, the more real it looked, blah, 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 blah. Whereas Disney was still, drawn with pencils on paper. So he saw that. He also, he wanted to show, we haven't been thrown out recently from Apple. He wanted to show those people they fucked up. Yeah. They made a big mistake.
They could start again. But a number that was interesting is that Tarzan, the movie, took about 500 or 600 animators, and an average Pixar movie, it's about 100 guys.
If that, yeah.
Yeah. So costs are like divided by 4 almost.
Yeah.
You create a movie for $100 million dollars, and the previous ones were like 200 or 300, and you can produce them much faster. So, but they tied. Actually, Pixar was the sole supplier of brain and creativity and everything for Disney over 6 years, and they had a specific agreement. You can only produce for us, Disney, and then we give you back part of the revenue that you help us generate, blah blah, minus distribution. I mean, they were trying to pull money out of every step. Disney and Pixar, and 2 years before the end of the contract, Steve Jobs probably had seen that coming, because at the beginning he was saying, we're learning from Disney. Disney University, as they write here. So he just took everything he could. He started, the company was maybe 10 million in sales. 6 years later, it's about 200. And I was like, well, we just made you so much fucking money. We're pulling out if you don't accept the renegotiation terms. So they start fighting. The previous CEO was not smart enough. They hated each other. And then Jobs would say, well, we'll just go to DreamWorks or 20th Century Fox or the others. And I think with what the state at which Disney was, plus all the money that Pixar had made them, I mean, they had to buy it. Because if they left, it would just destroy the whole thing.